I want to talk about the legal state and why it was created. Okay, so most people don't know the difference between the legal state and the actual state. Just like there's natural persons, there are natural lawful states. And just like there are legal fictitious persons, there are legal fictitious states. Okay, there's a lot more to it than that, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll keep it this way and we'll just keep it simple, stupid. And then if you want to learn more, you can watch some of my other videos. So, what is a natural state? A natural state is such as like the Republic of Texas or just in general Texas, because it's created from the ground up by natural persons. Natural persons are those who are not acting as a legal fiction. Natural persons are real. They're in fact. They're not under the law, according to the law. They're men in general. That's mankind. Human beings. They are persons and they have personalities, but not in the legal sense. They're in the natural sense. They have personalities in accordance with reality and truth, and they're persons in fact as well as in law. However, legal fictitious persons as well as states are not in fact. Now, John Solomon says they're not real. I've read another theory that says they are real, but they're not true. That natural persons are real and true and in fact, but legal fictions are not true, they're just real. So, in other words, legal fictions are the creations of man, whereas men are the creations of nature, hence, natural person. And this is man creation, legal fiction. So, this is fact, this is fiction. Okay, they're both considered real in some senses because a legal fiction can have real consequences. Okay, and then some theories allow for legal fictions to have rights and duties and privileges, such as some corporations, especially nowadays the ones that receive constant bailouts, whereas the natural person receives hardly anything. Okay, so the real state is created by the natural person, and as the populations grow, you get a town, a city, a county, a state, and in the legal fiction person, in the legal fiction realm, they create a legal state. Okay. Now, when people register their births in Texas, and I'm going to use Texas as my example because that's where I'm at, and so that's where I've done the most of my research on this particular fiction. And so you would have to look up some of the stuff in your state. So this is the parent worksheet for a child's birth certificate, and it calls this a legal document. Now remember, legal documents, legal persons, legal states, they're all fictions. They're not in fact, they're not real, they're juristic. They come under the law, not creators of the law, because this is what men create. These are real men, natural persons are real men. This is what men create. And man created the state of Texas. Okay, the state of Texas is a fiction. Texas is what's real, state of Texas is the fiction. And it has a lot to do with the way it's written right here. Okay, now the parent has to use their legal name, and then the parent creates a child's legal name. Now, remember, I told you that this is for fictions. So, Jurisprudence by John Solomon, chapter 15, under persons. Here's the cover of the book. If you want to look this book up, it's available on the internet. There's also a fourth edition, which I like a little bit better than this one, but this one's good. And you go down to chapter 15. And the whole book is good. You should read the whole book. But for the purposes of this, we're talking about the person and the legal thing being a fiction in law. It's after possessions. And I just want to do this to show you that this is a real book. It's actually printed. You can find it on the internet. It's by John Solomon, Theory of Law, or in other words, Jurisprudence. Okay. And the nature of personality, and how he describes personality is, anything real or fictional can be considered a person with a personality. Gods, angels, spirits of the dead are persons no less than men are. Okay, even though these are fictions. Okay, and he goes through here and he explains it. They're legal theories, fictitious, not real person. So what they did here is they created a fiction because they can't get control of you otherwise. They can't get control of you unless you're not real, because the government cannot control real individuals. They can only control classes of fictions, classes of persons. Classes of persons are also called people. So in the Constitution, where it says people of the state, it's talking about all those legal things, all those fictions. Okay? So we've got to understand that. And this is Jurisprudence by John Solomon. Just Google that online and you can find it. So now I want to talk about 1867, the Congressional Globe. I'm going to look at PDF page 146. I'm at 96. Let's go to 146. Okay, so Mr. Cowan, this is Mr. Cowan, and he's asking, Mr. President, what is a legal state government? Is it a government cooked up for a state here in Congress, or is it a government that the people of the state make for themselves? Okay, so now let's go over this statement. What he's saying is, what state are we talking about here? Are we talking about a fictional state, which would be here under the fictions, or are we talking about a real state, which would be created by the natural persons? Okay, we all have that birth certificate. If we're in Texas and we're over the age of about 150 or under the age of 150, we have a legal document applicable to the state of Texas, assigning us a legal fiction to be part of government. Now, you don't have to have a legal fiction to be part of the federal government. You can simply get naturalized, and that's the way they first started doing it. They would go to the state court and they would get naturalized as a legal fiction or citizen of the United States. And then they would go work on the federal lands, and they would go live there also, and they would become federal taxpayers. So it's sort of like a country inside of a state, or a state inside of a state. So that's one way to look at it, but it's a fictional state inside of a real state, or a legal state inside of a lawful state. And that's what he's asking in this congressional record. He's asking the president, who was Lincoln at the time, as 1867. He goes on to say, I'd like a plain answer to a plain question. Who made these state governments? The state government of Louisiana was made by the people of Louisiana under a proclamation issued by Mr. Lincoln, referring that question to them. The question then arose between Mr. Lincoln and the senator from Massachusetts. And then you can go on and read this. I'll show you the front cover here in a few seconds. And he also asks some other questions of Lincoln. And I really like this guy, Cowan. I need to talk about him more often. He's kind of just stirring up all kinds of problems in the congressional records. He asks a lot of questions that arise, and people really don't know now that these questions were ever even asked, because they just accept the way things are as the way they are, and that they're real and true, and um, that they are under the thumb of the government. So now I'm going to go to page PDF, page 796. And I hope that I'm clear in how I'm describing this. Okay. So now this is the speech of Honorable N.G. Taylor of Tennessee in the House of Representatives, February 16th, 1867. And he says, did Mr. Lincoln ever propound the theory that these states had ceased to be states? So the natural state and the legal state, one, they took this, Lincoln took this. I know how much people love Lincoln, but let's just look at the facts. Lincoln took this, try not to be emotional about it, and made it look like this. And then this actually disappeared. So now we believe that this has been all that ever was, and all that ever is, and all that ever will be. That this is what we have, and that's it. That this doesn't even exist, because nobody alive today has actually lived under a natural, lawful state. Did he ever hold that they had been guilty of felo de se or suicide, or that the act of war had destroyed their conditions as states? So did the act of war end this and replace it with this? That's what he's asking. Did the real thing get replaced by a fictional thing by mere act of war? He says, if so, when? In what terms did he express such an opinion? So he's asking, when did Lincoln say this, that these fake legal states, these fictional states, replaced what the people had actually created? Whenever this great leader of the Union Party wrote or spoke of the rebel sections, he named them states, although seated and at war with the government of the United States. That's why, because some of the states were at war with the United States. Now, I don't want to go into the whole slavery thing. I think slavery is wrong and it should have been done away with. Maybe this was the only way to do it, hoping that at some point in time, once slavery was not an issue anymore, we could get back to the natural states. And if that was the case, then I would say it's high time that we did get back to our natural states and get rid of these legal fictions, because they've just become a mechanism of tyranny to continue to exist. So we really need to understand that we're supposed to live in the natural state. And now in Texas, even after Texas joined the Union in about 1844, 1845, after they joined the Union and the state of Texas was created, the legal state, the fiction, the Capitol building was built after that, the one in Austin. Not that there's more than one, but the Capitol building in Austin was built. And inside that building, on the rotunda floor, embedded, is the phrase Republic of Texas, meaning that at that time, the Republic of Texas still existed, and the state of Texas was just a legal entity inside the Republic of Texas for the administration of the federal areas inside Texas, or inside the Republic of Texas. Okay, so if you want to know more, I have another video on it real quick. We, the people of the United States, became a Congress assembled, meaning they became a formal legal entity created by the states. You go to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and this is also described in the report, Jurisdiction over Federal Areas in the State. It's very well explained that on these federal lands, which is the sea and the lands purchased for defense, and let's look, defense is with a C, not an S, and there is a big difference. I have a video on that, check it out. To exercise legislation without the Republic of Texas, so to exercise fictional things on federal lands without, outside the natural state created by the natural people of Texas. Okay, that's where they have authority. That's where they make laws for. That's the district, which is the seat, and the lands purchased for defense. This is defense with the C. Look it up on my videos. Watch the videos. And so, in order to administer justice, they had to create some courts in the Republic of Texas, to which administered the justice for the state of Texas legal entity. And between the legal entity and the natural people of the state, between the legal entity and the state Republic of Texas, and this state of Texas legal entity for the federal government, created by the federal government, was supposed to administer contracts between this fiction and this natural state, so that the federal people who were required to stay on the federal lands could come off and use the services inside the state, and that's explained here. Okay, so this is jurisdiction over federal areas within the states. It's chapter 1, paragraph 1, and the courts are for them. The courts are for those legal entities. Okay, so you may have a birth certificate, but that doesn't mean you have to use it. That doesn't mean that when you go to court, you have to show up as a legal entity with a legal name. And I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm just saying that's my opinion. That's my understanding based on what I've read and what I've learned. So the Cowan papers, the Cowan debates are in the Congressional Globe for the second session, 39th Congress, Part 3 and appendix. And this was on page 1565 and looks like 169. So there's another part or an appendix, and some of the stuff was in that, which is a different page. So the pages are not exactly numbered in order. Okay, so here's the book on jurisprudence by John Solomon, where he tells you that those legal things are fictions and you're supposed to control it, and it's under the law when it acts for certain purposes, but you are not. Okay, so you can look up those books, you can see those things, and you'll understand you'll understand that those legal fictions were the citizens of the state and the federal government, according to the 14th Amendment, and not everyone is in that. Okay, so for example, my mother has so many children, and these are her children, and she can claim those children. And my grandmother has children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But they can't claim other people's children. They can only claim their own. And I would say, well, this is my mother and this is my grandmother, but I wouldn't say that your grandmother is also my mother just because your mother is a mother. So you can be a mother, but that doesn't mean that all the children belong to you. So I can be in this country, but that doesn't mean that I'm under or a part of the federal government. Okay, I'm under my local government and in part my state. Okay, and look at Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 through 18, and read that really well, and you'll see that Congress has the power to do these list of things, and it's a list. There's only one period, it's way at the bottom. And they can do them on the federal lands for defense with the sea purposes without state interference. Okay? And to make the laws to carry out those things. Okay, that you're a natural person, that you may or may not have a legal fiction, depending on if you want to play in that field and be a class of persons regulated, or you can be a natural person not regulated. That's your choice. And when you go to get a social security card or a driver's license, you have to show all those documents, and those are applications. And those applications by the government are considered advertisements. Okay, so they're advertisements, and then you can apply, and if you show the proof, then you can be under them as a legal fiction. Okay. Exclusive legislative jurisdiction, all the authority of the state in which the state has not reserved to itself the right to exercise any of the authority concurrently with the United States, except the right to serve civil or criminal process in that area for activities that occurred outside that area. So what that's saying is that when you put this in the context of the Constitution, which the Constitution declares the powers and authorities, which is jurisdiction, over those federal areas, it's saying that the federal government has authority over the federal areas without interference from the state. So the state cannot make laws for those areas. They can't legislate for it, except for the only thing they can do is serve civil and criminal process. And it's the same with the federal government. The federal government was not allowed to come off of the federal lands. They had no lawmaking authority. They couldn't make laws for you. The only thing they could do is if you went on their post, on their military lands, and committed a crime and then ran back off, they could serve civil or criminal process. Or if perchance a military member left a military area, a federal area, after having committed a crime, then the federal government can serve process. They can come off to serve process, and that's it. Okay. Now, when it talks about persons or people, I know this is hard to read, but it says governing power of the country. The people means governing power of the country. Okay, so in the federal Constitution, where it says we the people, it's talking about we, the governing power of the country. Fictitious or legal persons are of three kinds. They have three kinds. Okay, and I go over that here. Legal fictions, not fact, not real, is a fiction, fictitious, artificial, mythical, dead. They're juristic, meaning they're in the law, under the law, according to law. Rights and duties, such as those under oath. They're gods, angels, dead, people, corporations, myths. They're real or imaginary. They are considered persons. Persons are people. They're joint stock companies or municipal corporations. They're persons in legal contemplation. They're not a fictitious man. They're things. They're fictions. Personality, not human nature, bodies corporate. They have personality, but their personalities are not human in nature, and they are bodies corporate or bodies politic. Bodies corporate possesses judicial significance and thus receives legal recognition because they're judged. They're under the law. Personality by way of fiction where there is no person in fact. So this is a person in fact, a natural person. So like a corporation might have a personality, but it's not a man. It's not a person in fact. It's not a natural person. Okay, persons in law, but not in fact. Arbitrary creations of the law are of any kind. There's three classes: a first class, corporations, and members of corporations, members of clubs. The second class, institutions, churches, hospitals, universities, libraries, chancellors, vice chancellors, fellows, and graduates. The third, they use kind instead of class: funds, estates, charitable funds, trust estates, property of dead men, and bankruptcy. Okay, now you can just get out of there. They have said, and I don't agree with it being possible, that you can just quote unquote walk away. And you walk away, they're going to try to come after you. Okay, the term person as a legal fiction, as denoting a condition or status in the law, is therefore equivalent to a character. So you've heard them say wearing a mask. If you watch some of these shows or read these comics, they talk about certain people having masks on because they're acting as a fiction. Okay, your mask could be your legal name, acting as a fiction. Much of what the legal system does is not constitutional. And I go over that in another video. And they're not even real laws. That's why you have to apply. Okay, so to wrap this up, the federal government requires you to create a legal fiction by way of the legal document called the application for child's birth certificate for the legal state, giving your child a legal name so they can play in the fiction. And they did that because they needed to provide services to the people on the federal lands inside the real state created by the real people. But they had to pay the real people because the real people created that real state. And having exclusive legislative jurisdiction, those people were residents on the federal lands to which they were governed over by the federal government. So the state of Texas and its state of Texas Constitution is for those people on the federal lands who want to use the services in the state, in the natural state. Okay, so all these things that they do, okay, the powers of government, the legislative department, executive department, judicial, and a lot of people have issues with CPS or the police getting tickets and all this stuff. All that's under here because all that is for your legal fiction. This is the Constitution for the legal fictions. Okay, the real Constitution, in my opinion, is the one called Republic of Texas, because that was made from the bottom up. Republic of Texas was made by the people over here. Okay, over here, the natural people. They rose up in numbers. They created a government the way lawful people do. And they created something called Republic of Texas, and then joined the Union, and then the Union, being the federal government, was given some lands inside the natural state to work their fiction. And then in order to work their fiction, They needed a constitution for their fictions, and this is the constitution for their fictions. Okay. Statutes, constitution and statutes also for fictions. Statutes are for fictions. Statutes govern things. Okay. So there you have it. The courts, the state of Texas courts, when it's written the way it is on the birth certificate, is one set of court. If it's in all caps, it's, I believe it is the same legal fiction. Okay. And even though they're called state, they're still federal, because the state has to comply with the federal, this state, this legal state, this fiction state has to comply with the federal state, the federal constitution. Okay. And so the federal constitution has a website that basically shows you, such as this, with the asterisk, meaning they're constitutional. Without, it's meaning they're not laws. They have never been passed into laws, because the federal government doesn't have authority to pass these into laws, because they were only given certain powers. And for you to come under these, you have to have your legal fiction set up, and then they have to advertise to you by way of forms, which basically are contracts to which you have to sign, and then you become personally liable. So taxes, for example, are not a positive law. It's not a law. I have videos on this, and you can go check them out. And that's it for this video. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. I'll try to give whatever websites I can to help anybody who needs any help with just knowledge. And like, share, subscribe, and send these videos and emails if you can. I would appreciate getting the word out, because I am ready for freedom. I am ready to get on with my life without the federal government. I'm ready to use gold and silver as my currency. And I am awake. I am not asleep. This is a maxim. The law serves waking, not sleeping people. Okay, so this is not woke culture stuff. This is an actual, real maxim of law that's been around for a very long time. Okay, so please like, share, and subscribe.